Hi, good morning everybody and welcome to the employment panel. I'm Joanne De La Porte. I'm from Gleeds and I'm Head of Health for London and South regions. I've been in construction for 20-something years, originally architecture, then building surveying, and then I moved into strategic project management and programme management. And we have an absolutely amazing panel here for the employment panel, where we're going to look at how we bring more people into the industry and what the potential obstacles are. We have Aimee Barratt from Multiplex, Bennett, CIOB, Caroline Noakes, Conservative MP, and Mark Harrison from the CIOB. And they're just all going to run through an intro for you all. Thanks.
Should I kick off?
Yeah. You go, Aimee.
Hi, I'm Aimee Barratt. I am a HR business partner at Multiplex. So my role is very heavily involved with partnering with our project directors and this sort of senior leadership team across our projects. And I also manage the workforce planning for the company as well.
Good morning, I'm Marcus Bennett. I'm Head of Analysis and Forecasting, actually at CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board. We produce a great deal of research and publish that with a view to informing industry, trying to influence government policy, and that's moved away over the years from a lot of statistical data to how can we change things. So we've looked at topics like mental health, digitalisation, the adoption of modern methods, using technology to train people, but predominantly with a focus on skills and competence.
I'm Caroline Noakes, Chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee in Parliament, a role that I've had for the last 3 years. We have done a phenomenal amount of work in the last period in Parliament around women in employment particularly, but also at the moment we are doing an inquiry into the National Disability Strategy and particularly looking at how we can get more disabled people into work, closing that disability employment gap, which is so crucially important.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Harrison. I'm the Head of EDI, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Transformation. Gives me the longest job title at the CIOB. We are the biggest professional membership organisation for people working in construction, and I report directly to the Chief Exec, Caroline Gumble, who recruited me a couple of years ago. Our aim is to see a more accessible, welcoming, inclusive, productive construction sector, helping to address the skills gap. Thank you very much.
And welcome everybody. According to a report by the UK Construction Industry Training Board, the construction industry in the UK is projected to grow by 1.3% each year from 21 to 2025, creating 217,000 new jobs. However, the industry still faces challenges in terms of diversity and inclusion, particularly when it comes to promoting diverse talent to leadership positions. So we will now hear from our experts across a number of solutions to these problems and really hearing about your experiences. Marcus, can you give us some insight on the figures you have collected around the EDI talent within the UK construction industry, from those being attracted to those being retained and promoted, please?
Thank you, and thank you for name-checking one of my reports. And actually, I'll refer to that straight away. The significant thing there is that the construction industry does recruit people. It has about 170,000 people that join each year. But there's a gap between demand for construction and the industry's ability. And that gap is the equivalent of adding 45,000 people to the workforce every year for the next 5 years. And I think we're not quite sure where we're going to get them from. There's an additional challenge on top of that we need to respond to net zero if we're going to achieve net zero by 2050. We produced another report called Building Skills for Net Zero that identified there's a need to increase the capacity of the industry by another 13%. Sorry, I do a lot of numbers. That's the equivalent of adding an extra 300,000 people to the workforce. And my team tell me off because I keep saying they don't exist. there's 1 million vacancies at the moment, and there's some significant changes in the demographics of the UK. So just saying we need to create more jobs or get more people into jobs is an easy thing to say. It's a really difficult thing to do. So some other pieces of research we've published. One was called Rethinking Recruitment that we published a year ago, and it identified the challenge that for construction, only 14% of the workforce are women. And actually, if you look at site-based roles, it's fewer than 2% of site-based roles are filled by women. So in effect, for an industry desperate in need for new people, half the population is missing for some reason. So you'd have to look at that and think there's an opportunity there. There's a similar trend with ethnic diversity that for the UK, the ethnic minority population is, depending on what you count and who you count, it's around about 14 or 15%. That varies regionally, unlike the gender balance. But there's only about 6 or 7% representation in construction. So again, half of a part of the population is missing from the workforce. So when we're desperately in need of people, and we've been talking about inclusion for years and years and years, I've got to a point where I'm going out now and I'm telling people like the Construction Leadership Council and anyone else that will listen in Parliament, stop doing another bloody campaign to attract people into an industry where you don't change the attitudes and behaviours of the industry to make it a place that's acceptable and accessible for people to work. Okay? So all I hear are things that give me the indication that my daughter probably wouldn't want to work as a bricklayer on site. And we need to think what we do, because if we don't fill that skills gap, we're not going to build the homes we need. We're not going to build the schools and hospitals we need. Construction's an enabler of everything else around us. And there's some real challenges about climate that we need to tackle.
That's a really interesting point about changing the attitudes, isn't it? I mean, I asked a small group of 8-year-olds to draw somebody who works on a construction site. And my own son drew a man. So it starts very, very young where this stereotypical view embeds in, isn't it? I mean, has anybody else on the panel got anything to add in terms of how they feel we can be pushing this cultural change to actually bring those people in earlier? Caroline, have you...
So can I just say, and this is following on from what Marcus has just said, it is about cultural change. But the thing that strikes me, and I don't like to hark back to COVID because we've all escaped it, haven't we? And we're here today and it's great to be with people again. But during COVID, the government put out a range of reports talking about how each individual sector should cope with the precautions and the safety measures they had to put in for COVID. And there were oodles of reports, about 10 reports. And because I'm boring and was lacking entertainment in my life, I sat and I read the lot of them. And then I started counting the pictures. I was really bored. And the stark reality is that when you got to the construction sector report, a report issued by the government, a government that would say it wanted to increase diversity in all sectors, but perhaps specifically the construction sector, it was about 93% of the images in that report were of men. And when I looked at the pictures of women, guess what? They were pitching up as delivery drivers on site. And there was just no reflection. And I say this repeatedly, and you would expect this as chair of the Women and Equalities Committee. It is my job to scrutinise the government. I do not make policy. I hold them to account for what they are not delivering on. And you can't just use warm words to say, well, we need another campaign. You have to show it. You cannot be what you cannot see. And I mean, Marcus has set it out, a really poor level of representation of women in the construction sector, of people from different ethnic backgrounds, and indeed people with disabilities. And I don't just mean physical disabilities, but we heard Stephen earlier talk about neurodiverse people. I met the most amazing young man working, and okay, so it's sort of construction. He was working with an electrical company in my constituency. He was on the autistic spectrum. And his boss said to me, we have never had an employee like him, because his attention to detail, his diligence, his determination to get everything right every single time. He said, quality control has just gone absolutely berserk because they can't pick up anything that he's doing wrong. And I think that's one of the messages that we have to get out there. And we have to focus on how you can change cultures so we're not just looking for the easy, ready-made, obvious solution to recruitment. And let me tell you, I spent 18 months as the immigration minister. Every other government department thought the solution to recruitment was more immigration. It's not. That's a lazy solution. What you have to make sure is that you're giving opportunities to those people who are, in one way or another, excluded from that particular sector.
Anything to add, Mark?
Thanks. Just following on really from the data side from Marcus there, really important to have the facts and figures, absolutely essential in the work that we're doing. But I would also say, if we're talking about culture, I'd refer to kind of human stories. We've got a member, Anjali, who's a young woman, South Asian heritage. She's a brilliant surveyor in terms of window fitting on site. Every day that she goes onto a site, she struggles to find PPE that fits. That's dangerous, frankly. The tools are not designed for her, making her working life hard. She's often the only woman on site. Now and again, she gets the banter, and it can be quite hostile at times, she tells me. And then when she needs to go to the loo, she has to walk down the road very often because the facilities aren't there. So yes, we need the data, and we need to focus on recruitment. We do need to change that. We also need, at the same time, I think, and it is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, we need to change the culture. It is about the reality of working in the sector as well as the perception. And it's not just, we need to recruit more young people, more young women into the sector. We need to change the opinion of the parents who are guiding those young people as well, which is really important. I'll stop there. I could go on, but
They're all great comments. Amy, from a multiplex perspective, how does that data make you feel?
Yes, it's for Multiplex. So in terms of our female representation, we're sitting at 22%, which is good. But when you drill down to the actual facts and figures, we've got 13% of females on site. So it's about being really honest and transparent with your data as well. We can make a sweeping statement and say, look, we're doing pretty good, in terms of industry average, and we can market that and put that out there. But actually, when you drill down to it, there's a gap. So that 13%, what does that look like? What does the makeup of those women on site look like? Yes, we have a graduate program where we're committed to a 50-50 female-male, but it drops off, when it gets to the senior level. And it's about drilling down to that data, but then also going, yes, we can recruit, but how are we retaining those people as well? And I think that's the big struggle, to be honest, in the construction industry, is the retention.
Yeah, definitely. So following on from that, what strategies do you think UK construction companies can implement to actually identify and promote that diverse talent within the organisations? And if anybody's got any specific initiatives or programmes that have been successful that you're aware of or that you've been part of, it would be really great to hear about that. I mean, Amy, should we pick up with you first?
Yeah, I think the crux of it is having a really transparent promotion process. So how do we promote people? What does that look like? For us, it's about treating our internal promotions with as serious as we would when we're hiring someone externally. So making sure that there's a proper process, that everyone's aware of the opportunities. We know in construction that it's quite heavily dependent on project life cycles as well. So making sure that someone's not disadvantaged for a promotion because they might be on a project that's 2 years away from project completion versus someone that is coming up to 3 months away from project completion, and that's an easy fix for us to go, oh, do you know what? He's up to sort of roll off. Let's promote him, or the same with a female as well. Are we actually sort of testing ourselves and making those hard decisions to go, look, it might be a bit of a pain for the project, but that's the right person for the job. Let's pull them out and let's give them that opportunity. So it's really challenging the sort of narrative around that and the promotion process, I think.
Mark.
Thanks, Joanne. Am I allowed to do a little plug? Sorry.
Do what you need.
Okay, thank you. So at the CIOB, we recognise this is a problem. 90% of the sector is SME and micros. That we're not all tier ones. So we've launched a charter, an EDI charter for companies in the sector. 5 key actions that you can take to help make the sector more welcoming and accessible. The first is leadership. We want to see senior leadership talking about the benefits of a diverse, inclusive, welcoming sector. The second is to do your analysis. Who's in your workforce, who isn't, where's the underrepresentation, identify actions based on that. That's your local environment, so it's tailorable to any size, any location. The third is about culture. We've already spoken about culture. Take action to ensure your workplace culture is inclusive, it is welcoming to everybody. The fourth is around transparency. So we've seen many companies commit to diversity and inclusion over the last few years, very often without actually seeing what the outcomes of those statements are. So let's have transparency, publish the results on your website on an annual basis. Finally, senior accountability. Very often, I've been doing this a while now, and very often companies recruit junior equality advisors with no budget, no authority, and expect them to turn around the workplace culture of an organisation. It's not going to happen. There needs to be senior accountability. So I would encourage anyone, I mean, there are other initiatives available. There's the FAIR initiative at Supply Chain Sustainability School, but I would obviously recommend the CIOB Diversity and Inclusion scheme, and please come and talk to me afterwards. But in generality, those are good principles, I think, for changing the culture of an employee. Thank you.
Caroline, from a government perspective, we're seeing a lot more in tendering and procurement where we're talking about social values and having to demonstrate more about the equality and diversity within the business. And obviously there's the gender pay gap reporting. But do you think this could be led harder and more by the government? Do you see more coming across the line to even out that diversity?
So look, and everyone would expect me to say that, of course they can do more. And one of the things that I keep pushing the Equalities Minister on is not just about gender pay gap reporting, but about ethnicity pay gap reporting and making sure that there is transparency. I mean, I think my message to employers, none of you are going to like this, it's about the language of recruitment as well. So we all know, and I really hate gendered bullshit, but I'm going to give you some gendered bullshit. We know that women will apply for jobs where they can do 8 out of the 10 requirements, and men will apply for jobs where they can do 5 of them. So as I say to every woman in the room, you're already 3 steps in front when you walk into that interview. And it's about building confidence in them to take that approach. But BT has done some fantastic work about recruiting engineers where they deliberately changed the language and made it clear that they would train people to do the job. This is the bit that employers are not going to like. So stop thinking that you're going to go out there and get ready-made. You're not. Women are more likely to respond to job adverts where it is made clear you will be taught to do X, Y, and Z rather than you will be required to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, that takes investment, it takes time. But any good employer is going to want to invest in their people and grow them and enable them to get the promotions that Amy was talking about. Now, she spoke about transparency of promotion. Jeepers, you know, I come from a sector where there is zero transparency about who gets a promotion or not. It's all about climbing a slippery pole as quickly as you possibly can. The stark reality is that you have to allow people to develop and grow from inside organisations and accept that some of that investment is going to disappear off to one of your competitors because it's a competitive world. But actually, it's about taking risks on people, particularly young people who may turn out to be, you know, the next CEO of your company. I always say this, look, if people want to tick diversity and inclusion boxes, they go and get themselves some non-exec directors from outside. Bingo, you've got enough women on your board. You've got enough people from different ethnic backgrounds on your board. Actually, grow those people from within. Make sure that you're appointing directors who are part of your own company to begin with, rather than having me along to tick a box.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, I'm a huge data fan. I think it's the bedrock of most good decision making. Have you had organisations that have been really, really engaged about this data you've collected and are demonstrating a positive way of using it, or are we not quite there yet?
I wanted to answer your previous question, so I might have a go at that as well. I do. Yes, but I'll pick up a point that Mark said. Nearly 40% of all employment in construction is self-employment. The vast majority of companies are tiny, and we expect them to have the same resources and behaviours as the likes of Multiplex. Sorry to pick on you. It's really difficult. And I think one of the things that I've started to think about is it's not about treating people equally, and a colleague has used the term equity. We need to treat people appropriately so that they can all achieve an equal outcome, which I think is a point Carolyn was making. It's really difficult for small companies. So the ones that are engaging with this are the likes of Multiplex. Mace, who the other week told me they're going to have 50% women. But Mace don't employ any bricklayers. They don't employ anyone on site. If you're on site, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think what you've got to do is you've got to put in place a situation where the big firms that are dependent on their supply chain, they tend to impose all the risk, also say these are the standards that we expect of a work in practice. And that's difficult for construction. It's an unusual sector. It's about how do you create a flexible environment. Women are much more likely to have caring responsibilities than men. I don't want to keep saying ethnic minority and women, but basically it's people that don't look like me, a white middle-aged man, because all of the structures and processes are set up for my circumstances, not other people's circumstances. And if the only way you get on, the only way you get your first step on the ladder so you even stand a chance of aspiring to be on the board one day is by being more resilient and more determined than anyone else, it's the organisations need to work out how to fix some of the barriers. And now I'll go to your first question, because sometimes those barriers are really simple things. Sometimes it's about toilets. Okay, so I heard a story where a company took a whole load of school children to see a site. They were really proud when they opened up the man's toilet and the women's toilet. They had a women's toilet, but it was where they stored all the tools and toilet rolls, so it was completely not able to function as a toilet. It sent a message to all those young girls who said, this is not an industry for me. So what we hear, and I'll refer again to the rethinking recruitment piece that we placed, was those people that work in nice environments love construction. It's a brilliant place to work. There's loads of things to do. It pays well. There's brilliant opportunities to progress, but only if you're the right person and you fit in. You need to make it somewhere that everyone can fit in with nice toilets, flexible working. That's a real tough ask, and it probably needs to start with the likes of Multiplex, with the construction playbook, with government insisting that any public sector contract meets certain standards all the way down. And that's tough for an industry that very often only makes 1%, 2%, 3% profit. So we all need to think differently. And then I'll go on to productivity, because the answer is productivity. Let's get more out from less in by training people better, creating an environment that everyone can be in. Sorry you got so much from me.
No, not at all. Just going back to the point that was made, I think it was Amy, about when you're recruiting in and the numbers of senior people bringing through and the fact that you need to be backfilling. I genuinely believe there's so much value, as Caroline said, in looking at those who are already within your business. I'm a female that has very much struggled for 23 years to fight my way up, because there's always been a very natural assumption on the first day that I'm in the room, in a meeting, that I'm not the smartest person in the room. And it is there, day in, day out, and I'm okay with it, I manage it. But I also see a wonderful team of women around me, and they will always question more the promotion side. Are they ready? Should they be earning that much? Should they be asking for that much? And I think that's the other cultural shift, isn't it? It's those people that you're trying to retain that are just such valuable assets to your business, to believe that they are as good as the next man in the room. And I think that's something that we as businesses need to change individually across the businesses and then empower. I mean, what's your view on that, Amy? Do you see that within Multiplex, the women holding themselves back almost?
Yes, we do, definitely. And I just want to say, I'm obviously saying about Multiplex, and we're very transparent, all this process. We're by no means perfect. We've got a long way to go. But as I said, it's about being honest with ourselves, listening to our staff, gathering feedback. But most definitely we see it, and it's something that We can do all we can at that graduate level, but if someone's looking above and they don't see a senior female above them, what are they working towards? What is that realistic? So yes, we want to grow within. If we need to sort of inject female talent from outside to ensure that our junior females have those role models, we do that as well. But it's about striking that balance for sure.
Absolutely. So next question, how can the UK construction companies create the culture that is more inclusive and welcoming to diverse employees? And are there any specific steps that can be taken to foster a sense of belonging and support for those underrepresented groups? And Caroline, I'll start with you.
Thank you. And everyone else has talked about it. So I'm going to say facilities, and the immortal phrase that I learned from Michaela Wayne is that I don't want to piss in a bucket. And I really don't. And is it any surprise? So we've all talked about Lou's, but it is about facilities, but it's also, and Mark spoke about it, the banter defence. So and I always go off on one and I'll end up saying something really inappropriate and controversial that will make some headline somewhere. Look at the CBI. And look at the Metropolitan Police and the London Fire Brigade, and look at successive reports that have found them to be institutionally racist, institutionally homophobic, institutionally misogynistic. And then hear people in those organisations saying it was just a bit of banter. Banter is not okay. And if you want diverse employees to feel wanted and accepted in your business, then you have to deal with the banter. And look, let's face it, I work every single day in an atmosphere where somebody will tell me that I'm at a funny age and oh God, she's off on one again, it must be her hormones. And that's banter, and it's water off a duck's back to me, but I have spent an entire career being the toughest bloke in the room. And so that actually is wearing. That is really, really exhausting for every one of us that has to shoulder it. So that's the best way you can deal with culture. You can look at all of those shocking examples that I just gave you and know that every organisation, every sector, every business at some point is going to have its Me Too moment, and you're much better to have put the policies in place that deal with that before you end up on the front page of The Guardian for being an institutionally racist organisation. So, address it now before it happens to you. And I think that's my strongest message. Listen to your workforce. Listen to the people who are already in your organisation. Listen to those people who actually didn't turn up for their job interview and ask why. Why are we not appealing to people from different backgrounds? What is it that we have done wrong? And look, I spend my days as chair of the Women and Equalities Committee fighting that fight as, apologies, posh white bird, because I can, because I have a voice that can do it, because I have balls of steel and I don't care what people think of me. And they do think that I'm the most aggressive, awful woman in the room. But the stark reality is that I have to do that because there are younger women at the start of their career who are too afraid to. There are I have colleagues from different ethnicities who are afraid to speak out because they're worried what it will do to their career. We have to tackle that culture right from the ground level upwards and make sure that it is okay and that we can have policies where it is okay to whistleblow, policies where it is okay to raise concerns, so that I never, ever again get an email from a female HR director that says, please don't ever publish my name because I wouldn't want my employer to know that I was going through the menopause. And I just replied with one sentence, you're the bloody HR director. And sorry, bit ranty, but it is about being open, being transparent, having those conversations and being brave enough to do it.
Mark, from the CIOB perspective, what sort of steps are you taking with your membership to push this forward?
Well, I was just going to agree with Caroline's points there. Obviously, I'm another white middle-aged bloke, so I've been privileged enough not to have to put up with that kind of culture of negative, the banter and so on. I can't remember who said it. Might have been Carnegie. Culture eats policy for breakfast, and that is so true. I'm lucky to work for the CIOB with some great female leaders, but that's not true for everybody. And I do think, in an organisation, the culture is determined by the worst behaviour that is acceptable. And that is, it's so important to have leadership. And when we see big institutions failing on this, the ones that Caroline has mentioned, it just goes to show how really important it is that we address this. At the CIOB, I've mentioned the charter, I won't go into it again, but a key element of that is helping employers ensure workplace culture changes and for the better. So we do see organisations, Wilmot Dixon's committed to a Call It Out campaign, I know Mason's committed to targets. We do need the role models, but at the end of the day, if the workplace culture isn't a good fit, people won't stay. I mean, final point, we at the CIOB, what we're trying to do is reach out beyond the construction sector. We recognise if we are going to affect change in respect of gender in particular, we need to reach young women who haven't before considered construction or the built environment as a career. So we had a stall at the Women of the World Festival. Our future president, Sandy, was there, and we met loads of young women, and not just young women actually, women from all ages who were really interested in the construction sector. We got fantastic careers, well-paid jobs, but the table next to us was a stall of a woman who was an engineer who'd given up being an engineer. She was well qualified. She couldn't take the workplace culture, so she opted to a career in painting instead. A perfect example in an event dedicated to gender equality. I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And I've seen personally a lot of females leave the industry. A lot of the people that I came through from university are no longer in the construction industry. Tipping point was generally the point that the babies arrived, couldn't get the flexible working, etc. I mean, Amy, from your point of view, what sort of things is your organisation doing to bring, because they're women that are highly trained and they're currently not working in this industry. How do we bring them back?
Yeah, it's a really good question. A couple of years ago, we had a good hard look at ourselves and actually reviewed our maternity policy. So it was 9 weeks and we pushed it out to 9 months, and that's something that has been received really well. But it's not just about sort of that time that we obviously fully pay someone. It's about how we're keeping in contact with mothers that are on maternity leave, how we're welcoming them back, ensuring that opportunities aren't missed just because they are with their child for 9 months a year. So that onboarding back is really important. It's getting feedback from people that have gone through that process as well. It's all sort of key things really. But the maternity gap is a challenge we're constantly facing.
And it's a pool of women that we're losing, isn't it? So we need to see an improvement. I mean, I generally feel that in the last 20 years, we have taken very positive steps forward. It's quite different now to how it was 20 years ago when I was the younger person in the office. But the reverse mentoring, I think, for any of us that are at a certain point and up, is very, very valuable, because you see the perspective of that younger person coming through as well, don't you? So what do you think the most pressing needs are for the UK construction industry in terms of that talent gap for development and training as well? And are there any areas where you feel that there does need to be more investment and attention, because actually they are areas that could attract and increase that female base? We'll start with Marcus. Mark. Marcus.
I'm Marcus, yeah.
Marcus.
Well, I think the evidence demonstrates that where we invest in doing things differently, it pays dividend. And earlier you asked for examples. So TimeWise is one of those examples where they've provided flexible working. That was a CITB fund initiative led by Build UK, but with Wilmot Dixon and other big firms. And they got the kind of outputs that they were wanting. People were more engaged, they stayed, they had the reason to progress, they were more productive. What do we need to do? Golly, it's such a big challenge. I think there's a few things. One is, going back to a point, Marcus 30 years ago would have been too timid and scared to speak up. So how do we enable people like my daughter, my son, to speak up if they see wrongdoing? And I think probably the people that look like me have to set the strongest example, because we've got the confidence, and nearly always we're in the position of authority where we can say what is and isn't acceptable, and we need to do that quite demonstratively. There are challenges around the productivity gap. So this is going to sound like ruthless segmentation on my part. We really need to stop older people leaving the workforce. But the people that are coming in new, we need to change the attitudes and behaviours, because the sexist, racist, homophobic attitudes that I've heard reported start in the FE classroom. And if that's the experience people have early on, it looks normal and it progresses. So I would say not only do we need to set good examples all the way through, the biggest thing we need to do as a country is invest massively in skills and training. Sadly, FE has taken a bit of a hit in recent years, so if I had the ear of anyone, I would say we really need to think about that, because it's the future. And I think we've got to be pragmatic and set sensible targets. So the kind of things I'm doing now is my aspiration has changed. I'm working with my team to understand what we can reasonably make different in 20 years' time, because that's a kind of a generation that we're thinking about. So I think we need real long-term planning, aspiration, culture change. And the answers to the question are in the Rethinking Recruitment report. We've kind of said what needs to happen in that.
And Mark, from your perspective, are there certain areas within the construction industry that we should be targeting to attract those people into?
Well, I think, and I've said quite a lot about it already, I think recruitment is really critical, and we need a different approach to marketing the sector, the built environment sector, and I think we should call it that. Gen Z people are more interested in social responsibility. It's not just about the paycheck. They want to see what companies are doing around sustainability, around diversity and inclusion. They want to work for companies who have that commitment. And we shouldn't forget they will increasingly become clients. So there is a lot to do. I think Marcus has set out a good summary there. A lot of work to do, but what I would really like to see is leadership from people who look like me. I think, the business case is there. It's been made. We know we need to address the skills gap. There is a real business imperative, and we need leadership from business. We need leadership from government as well, and also organisations like the CIOB. We're trying to do our bit on this agenda.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, we're going to just open to the floor for some quick Q&A. So is there anybody that's got any questions they'd like to ask? We got no hands. Oh, yep, lady at the front.
Sorry. So in terms of talking about attracting women into the industry, I guess for me, it's what to do to then retain them once they have a family. So maternity, amazing. My personal experience has been quite bad in terms of, I'm the breadwinner for the family. We ended up in debt during my maternity, and I only took 6 months. So that's mind-blowing that you're able to do that. But after that, when the responsibility of caring for children comes, and again, for me, because I'm the breadwinner, I work more, my husband looks after the children, so I'm in the privileged situation. But still, like the mum guilt, the being able to look after them when they unwell, and then the pressure of being there for meetings and always being available and working as if you don't have children, like how that can change, what can be done to support women after they had children so they do stay in the industry. Sorry, I don't know why I'm just looking at Amy. It's a general question to you, Joanne, as well.
I think the answer really is flexible working, and how do our leaders lead by example around flexible working. It needs to be something that is encouraged. As an industry, we're not good with it. I think a positive that came from COVID is actually seeing that as an industry we can work flexibly. It might not, it differs from obviously site to office-based roles, but there needs to be a flexible working policy in place. There needs to be transparency around what you as an individual needs as well with that. And it shouldn't be seen as a disadvantage because your hours might be slightly different. You know, it needs to be output driven, but it needs to be led from the project directors, the managing directors, that is okay as well. If your leaders don't buy into flexible working, it's not going to work.
Can I chip in? Because a member of my team's just gone on maternity leave and I've been told off for saying, what do we do to make sure she comes back? And I kind of think we have to be realistic. I grew up in a family with just one parent, my mum. There's no way she could have worked on a construction site and looked after children. But if you're a firm of architects, civil engineers, if you're a team like mine, there's no reason why people can't have children, can't work flexibly. So it should just be accepted that for a lot of roles, it's stupid to even consider that it's a challenge. I've occasionally have people come on calls with me and they've got a child with them. We can flex around other people and they can flex and people make it work. I'm not sure it's going to fix my 2% site-based workers, but we ought to say some stuff is and should be normal now, and it shouldn't be out of place that someone in, I assume, a professional type role is having the challenge you are. The challenge for us is to then say, well, how do we make that possible for other people as well? And I think there are things that will come along, that, you know, there are people here selling us gizmos. Digitalisation is about productivity. There's a future in which female crane operatives are working from home in the same way RAF drone operators are in a bunker in Waddington. There's things that could happen. People need to think about the benefit that's derived from it. Because like I say, we're just missing huge swathes of people from an economy that desperately needs people. And, you know, if immigration isn't the answer, which it has been, we need to train and equip people to work. Because they're going to get more and more and more expensive. And the value in enabling people to work regardless of their circumstances becomes greater and greater. There's that great line, it's the economy, stupid. So the reason why we should enable people with children to work, or anyone, is the economy, stupid. It's about growth.
Oh, thanks very much. So I think it's time we need to wrap up, but without saying a massive thank you to Amy, Marcus, and Caroline and Mark. It's been absolutely thrilling conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.